Hey, thanks for tuning in. This is part 2 for this kit. I posted a box opening and sprue review video a few weeks ago. I did this build a little different than how I'll do most of my future builds on the channel. It's kind of a before and after, but I think people like to watch the build. Okay, let's start. The blue parts are parts you do not use. There are a couple parts that you do use. You can choose between 4 idlers and between 2 drive sprockets. I've checked the ones that I went with. That D1 part, one side is beveled and that faces the wheel. It actually won't fit if you have it backwards. There's 4 pin marks on the back. I filled and sanded 2 of them, in case you can see any of it from the front of the model. The L3 is a tiny piece that could have been molded on. It's a Dragon kit, so you get a lot of that. You'll do 4 of the one piece and 1 of the other piece. The difference is the angle in the L7, L6 piece. There were 4 runners per insert. At least 1 or 2 of them looked fine in the end, and that'll be the edge I make visible if it comes up. I put those C-shaped pieces on first, then the whole front piece indexed in perfectly. This diagram is at the bottom of the page, but you need to do this now, adding the H1 and H2 parts. The small idler axle part is not symmetrical, and it's not perfectly clear how it indexes in. I will be adding the wheels and such later. That went together just fine. A few parts for the rear. I'll be painting the muffler part separately and putting it on at the end. This went in just fine for the most part. That C41 part is so tiny. I had to trim the base of C2 a little to fit in. That all went together fine. This is a busy looking step, but it went smoothly. I put things on sort of left to right, top to bottom, and it worked out. Don't miss that box J68 on the far right. I almost did. Everything here went on nicely. I had to sand the front fenders a little for them to line up. You may think A26 is too small or the wrong part, but on Panzer IIs there's that gap on either side of the grating. A35 does not go in oriented as shown. Rotate it so the curved part faces in, and I had to trim the small end a little bit for it to fit. I went with the closed part, J61. In hindsight, I should have painted the interior of it black first. There's a little notch on N9 and K22 that make it easier to fit the parts in right. Don't worry about drilling or filling those holes, they get covered up. A3 and A8. They're blued out on the parts map, but you use them here. And it's A13 on the sprue, not A3. I had to drill out those holes a little bit. Looks a fair bit busier than it is. So there's a little notch inside the light for indexing, but when you set it in, the light slot is not perfectly horizontal. This is what I mean. These are going to connect to the protective mantlet later. In hindsight, I would have waited until that happened and then glued those in. There's a lot going on here. I started with this, putting those 4 pieces together. That little piece is actually A57. Then I glued those 2 bottom pieces to A52 one at a time. This was the trickiest bit. You're getting 6 pieces to fit together at once. After a lot of trial fitting, I found starting with A44 worked best. You have to put this piece in when fitting the rest up. It won't go in after. The long pin is at the bottom, and it doesn't actually have those 2 side rods. You'll see. These are those ammo shelves behind the gun. The braces angle back, as shown. Why couldn't Dragon have put the pins on the bottom side? Here they are, front and center. I glued K21 to K2 first, then attached K14. I'll paint them separately and put them on later. I want to be able to do the back deck. And that's it. Now for the priming. I'll keep this up for a bit. Disclaimer, I am not sponsored by anyone. This is what I purchase and this is what I use. I have a Pasha single action that I use just for metallic paints, and a double action Pasha that I use for applying varnishes and chipping fluids and sometimes priming. I use the Iwata Eclipse for this, which I love. I highly recommend getting a quick connect. They're like $10 and you won't know how you lived without one. I couldn't recommend this compressor more. About $150. Excellent fine pressure regulation, and it is amazingly quiet. I'll be using these 3 paints. I dilute all my Tamiya paints 40-60. I run at a fairly low pressure, 12 to 15%, 0.35 needle, so I dilute the Vallejo primer 50-50. Vallejo Panzer Aces and the model line are quite viscous. I dilute them at least 35-65. I make my own thinner and airbrush cleaner. Those 250 ml bottles of flow improver and fluid retarder are like 12 to 15 bucks and will last you a very long time. For the airbrush cleaner, a third of each of those plus the flow improver. A liter of that lasts me quite some time. Okay, let's get on to the painting. Before I paint, I use the airbrush to clean any dust and Chesapeake Bay Retriever fur off of the parts. I'm painting the wheels with NATO Black. I'm at 15 psi. I use a circle stencil to then prime the wheel. For the Vallejo Red Brown, I'm at 12 psi. One of my favorite technical how-to channels is Airbrush Asylum. I've learned so much from him. I used to leave the needle cap on. Taking it off really helps. Another great tip of his was when airbrushing, push down for air first, then pull for paint, and do the opposite when finished. In other words, start and end with just air. Made a big difference on how smooth and consistent the paint goes down with double action brushes. Airbrush Asylum. And a special thanks to James at LPJ Models. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. I try to keep it as light as possible, slowly building up the paint, especially on the nooks and crannies where you have to paint the same area from several angles. Lastly, the tracks. My track primer color is Vallejo Dark Rust. I'll use AK and MIG wet and pigment effects on them later. I should have cleaned those up first.
And look at you! Look at that hole in your tank top. What if the parishioner saw that?
Where, Ted?
Ah, God, would you look at that?
Well, here we are. What's next will be touching up the wheels and painting the return rollers in black. I'll give the springs a bit of burnt iron, then apply a satin polycoat to protect everything up to that point. I've decided on the German gray with winter wash scheme. I'll be hairspray chipping the base color and then doing the same with the whitewash. I'll detail up the drivetrain and interior details. In the last episode, we'll see the weathering and final touches. As always, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Take care and happy modeling.